Good evening, everyone. My name is Tracy. We are coming to you live from Senator Whitehouse's office. Welcome to our second virtual assembly. I am very excited to have you all here. If you would like to leave a question and did not pre-submit one, please leave it in the Q&A function using your name, your town, and any other additional information you'd like to leave. And we will kick it over to Senator Whitehouse to get us started and introduce tonight's special guest.
Thank you, Tracy, and thank you to everybody who's participating through Zoom and everybody who's watching across YouTube. I'm grateful that you're interested in all of this. As you know, Elon Musk and Donald Trump and the Trump administration have all been taking potshots at Social Security, which I think is a lead up to a planned attack of some kind on Social Security. So we're going to focus for the first half hour on Social Security. And to help me explain things about Social Security, I have a truly wonderful and distinguished guest, Martin O'Malley. Martin O'Malley was originally the mayor of Baltimore and a truly excellent mayor. As mayor of Baltimore, he established something called CityStat, which was such a terrific improvement in how local accountability happens that it really went national. And Mayor Cicilline picked it up in Providence for the Providence Police Department. He now looks like he's coming to us from the Witness Protection Program, but he's actually in his car. After being mayor of Baltimore, he became governor of Maryland, was a very successful and popular governor. And what makes him particularly relevant to this conversation is that President Biden asked him to take over as Social Security Administrator. And he ran Social Security under the Biden administration very effectively, with a real emphasis on improving customer service, reducing wait times, and making everybody feel that when they called or tried to contact Social Security, they got a quick and warm response. So, Governor, welcome. I'm delighted that you are here. I appreciate it very much. And having gone through these terrific attributes that you brought to your role as Social Security Administrator, why don't you just give us a little intro on who the character is right now, who is the acting Social Security Administrator, and how his credentials compare?
Yeah, it would almost be laughable, except that the reign of terror has been unleashed on these really good people who work hard every day. They haven't quit, even though for the last 10 years, House Republicans have reduced their staffing to a 50-year low, even as us baby boomers swell their ranks every day to an all-time high. And so when the Trump—
That's before the Trump cuts.
That's even before the Trump cuts. When for the last 10 years, this is the largest domestic program in America, as you know, Senator, because you fight for it every single day. And you understand these issues, the bills you've put in to extend its fiscal health way into the future. This is a lifeline to 72 million people. 40% of all seniors living alone over 65 depend entirely on Social Security. But for the last 10 years, Social Security wasn't even given an appropriations hearing in the relevant subcommittee in the House. In fact, House Republicans marched in line to vote to cut Social Security by $500 million last year, even before they had given Social Security a hearing so we could make our case. So the first acting commissioner was actually a very qualified senior executive service person named Michelle King, with whom I'd worked. She had worked in the last Trump administration. She was the deputy commissioner for all of operations, namely those 1,211 and now being cut field offices all across America. After she was there for just a couple of weeks, this person, Lee Dudek, was a GS-15, about 4 down, not even part of the senior executive service. He was put on administrative leave, reportedly, and according to an affidavit recently signed by one of his—
Administrative leave, for those who aren't following this, is a disciplinary matter.
Right, pending an investigation, because one of the things that they will fall on a sword to protect at Social Security is your personal data. the personal data of every single American that's in that database. And so he went online. He put on LinkedIn a screed saying, "I confess I shared data with the Doge team. I confessed I bullied employees to share data," on and on and on. By the end of that 3-day weekend, because it was President's Day, he had been named the acting commissioner of Social Security. I'm not aware of another time when a GS-15 who was only supervising about 5 or 6 people was elevated to run an agency with 70,000 people. He'd never even run part of the division. And then Michelle King resigned, her deputy.
She resigned because she was put under pressure to reveal Social Security data to I call them the doggy boys, the muskrats, the people who are trying to prowl through Social Security data for Elon Musk.
Correct. And she wouldn't do it. And so this is a woman who probably at the age of 23 in Sterling, Illinois, went into the Social Security Administration. It was her whole life, but honorable people. So
she got shoved out, and up comes Leland Dudek from his tiny little office where he supervised 5 people. And his one credential was that he was willing to give out Social Security data and do whatever the doggy boys wanted.
Well, that's true. And he was also an anti-fraud guy, kind of a data guy. That's how I always, that's how I knew him. And by the end of that first 4-day week of his, he had totally dismantled his former division, the Office of Analytics, Review, and Oversight. These are the people that guard against overpayments, mistakes, double check the allowances. He had torn it apart like the flying monkeys tore apart the scarecrow. And then he made the deputy commissioner, his former boss, presumably the one who put him on administrative leave with the okay of Michelle King, made her stand up in front of her colleagues and tell them that she'd been reassigned as a senior advisor to the press office. The next week, he did away with the entire office, and one of the most capable people I've ever worked with, Eric Powers, and the Office of Customer Service Transformation. Told him his services were no longer needed. He said, "Tell your 80 people they're no longer needed. They're fired for cause too." Then that afternoon, he brought in another A-plus player, a woman named Claudia Postel, the head of the Office of Civil Rights and Equal Opportunity. And he told her, "Your services are no longer needed. Tell the other 163 people in your division that they're no longer needed." And that sent a chilling effect throughout the agency. And only then, the next day, did they say, "All right, we are going to offer cash payments to anyone who will leave now. So anybody that's retirement eligible, you got to file by March 12th, but we will pay you through the entire year." And at several large town halls across Florida where I was this last weekend, somebody said, "Where does that money come from?" And I said, "It comes from you. It's the dollars you put into Social Security." So they're paying people to leave right now. Don't let the door hit your backside on the way out. And they will pay them for the whole year not to work. They're paying other people $10,000 to leave if they're not retirement eligible, or $25,000, depending on their years of service. And as we speak, they are dismantling this agency. They are gutting its staff, and they are breaking it from the inside to make it incapable of serving the American people who paid for it and who paid for the customer service. I do believe they want to break it so they can liquidate it because they want those trust fund dollars.
You've run the organization, you know how it works and how it's structured. You have a sense of the machinery. Is there any defensible logic to how they're going about clearing out these personnel? Is there any assessment of who is actually essential to the successful operation of the administration and who could, possibly be allowed to go? Or is it just, it sounds like it's just chaos. Well, I think you might have frozen up. Well, we'll see if we can get Martin back on. He's either extremely still or he's frozen on my screen. Martin, if you can hear me. Oh, there he goes. He's back off again. He may be able to come back on with voice and not video if he's having signal troubles, because I know he's in his car. Just by the way, he was not driving. He was parked. As And there's no road safety issue with all this. So let me start going through a couple of questions that I can answer while we're waiting for the governor to come back on. Elizabeth from Charlestown asked, what would Social Security changes mean for veterans benefits, Medicare, and Medicaid? And the answer to that is that Social Security is not connected to veterans benefits or Medicare or Medicaid. So even if Social Security were badly disrupted by this mischief that is being taken place in Social Security, those programs would go on. There's no mechanical connection. The connection is the willingness of Donald Trump and the Trump administration and Elon Musk to attack these programs. And to different degrees, they're all under attack. You've just heard from Governor O'Malley about what has happened to Social Security just in these first 8 weeks of the Trump administration and the path of destruction that this character is wreaking through the office. In veterans benefits, we've seen the notices of tens of thousands of of firings that are due for the VA. And with respect to Medicaid, they've got hundreds of billions of cuts that are baked into the budget that they're working on. So welcome back, Governor. I was answering a question that you didn't need to while I waited for you to get reconnected. So just to leave off where we were, the question was, is there any possible rhyme or reason to what they're doing, or is this really just a path of destruction?
It's a path of destruction. Social Security operates now, because of all of these cuts, on less than 1% overhead to benefits paid. If you compare that to any other insurance company in the world or any private insurance company here at home, Allstate operates on 19% overhead. Liberty Mutual, 23% overhead. This is the most efficient insurance program in America. Far from being a Ponzi scheme, it has operated for 90 years, never missing a benefit payment. But these guys, and from my reading, it seems they're all guys, are driving this agency into a total system collapse. What people will see right now and what they're already seeing is wait times going up for every line of service. The 1-800 number, which we had gotten down to 12 and a half minutes, is now back up to a half hour. The huge wait for initial disability determinations, which we were moving in the right direction by the end of the Biden administration, is now shooting up again. And there are more people dying waiting for their initial disability determinations than ever before. So the wait times for even applying for your retirement or Medicare or getting an appointment, as they close field offices and they seek to cut and drive out staff. I mean, we thought attrition was the fire-breathing dragon. These guys are throwing kerosene on the fire and driving people out. So all of the wait times are going to skyrocket. Then what you're going to see is intermittent interruptions of service, like the one that happened on Saturday when people couldn't get in for about an hour into myssa.gov. There was an intermittent interruption 10 days before. Some of them they're able to get back on. Others, it takes them longer. So what you're going to see is more interruptions for longer periods of time. Ultimately, that will cascade, I do believe, into an interruption of benefits. Why? Because the people in OBIS, the Office of Benefit Information Systems, are 40 or 45% retirement eligible. And without any knowledge transfer from these very smart people who not only know, Senator, how to code COBOL, a very old computer language, which is the basis of this system, but they understand the architecture, how that base then plugs into more modern applications that have been set on top of that over the years to process claims, the workarounds in the regions. I believe that we are headed to benefit interruptions, and I believe it'll happen sooner rather than later, probably within the next 90 days.
For how many different payments Social Security puts out in any given pay period? How many Americans are on the receiving end? How many times does the system have to get it right?
Oh, 70 monthly, 72 million and counting.
72 million.
And counting, and will continue to go up because of us baby boomers applying another 10,000 every day, I think was the number. And then, to get the number right, there have to be people that interview those people, that talk with those people. I mean, some things can be done over online, but some things require adjustment. Like if somebody retired, if somebody applies for Medicare at 65, but they choose to continue to work and earn, that's a very dynamic record that has to be checked and guarded against in terms of overpayments or underpayments while they continue to work before they claim, as they claim their retirement. So this is a very dynamic system. There's no way around people talking to people. And these guys that say, oh, we're just going to replace them all with robots, have never had the humility to sit with people, meeting people, processing the claims. I sat with workers. That's all I did for the first month, Senator. I wanted to understand how they process claims, how they answer calls, what systems they use, how those systems interact or don't, and how they deliver for the American people, even though there's been no increase in their IT budget. Far from it. IT modernization is not something that Congress has allowed Social Security to do. Now, they still find ways. Last year, we reduced the time it takes to process a Medicare claim from 8 minutes to 8 seconds with an automated tool that they created themselves. We switched from a Verizon phone system for the 1-800 to AWS on August 22nd, and we were able to get the speed to answer down to 12 and a half minutes. But look, as they continue to fire teleservice employees, we are going to see those times go back up. So that's the sad state of affairs. We're in a race. They're trying to break it before people wake up, the American people wake up to the fact that they're pulling a fast one. You know who they sent up this week? They sent up equity finance people. And they say they're too looking for waste. Maybe they know where all of the 10 million, 18 million, 300-year-old zombies are, and they can find them there. That's not why they're there. They're there to see what the value of the assets are when they break it, and the American people say, oh, just get it back on. We don't care. I think they have a rude awakening coming. People need to wake up, rise up, and ask, why are you trying to destroy my Social Security? Cut it out.
So Nancy from West Warwick wrote in to ask, is there a plan in place to make sure our Social Security benefits are not interrupted during these changes? And obviously you've answered that. And we've got to be very alert to a systems failure that could interrupt Social Security benefits because the good people who know how to run the system are being shoved out the door. Her second question is our personal information compromised? What do you think about that?
Yes, because they've allowed these Doge Bros to look at it. In fact, high-ranking people resigned rather than allow them access when they wanted. The affidavit is by a woman named Tiffany Flick. If you Google it, I think it's pretty chilling. The other thing that she says right around paragraph 49, Senator, is that they are making this data, this personal data, vulnerable to bad actors, a term that we usually reserve to foreign adversaries. Yeah. Anybody that gets a new ID, like a new identity, like somebody that turned on the mob, somebody that helped American forces in Afghanistan, somebody that defects from China or Russia, they have to get a new Social Security number to match that new identity. So the truth is, not to freak people out too much, a lot of our Social Security numbers are already compromised, but there's medical data and there's other things. And that's why the professionals at Social Security guard that personal data like a sacred trust, as well they should.
But one of the things that I remember from my time on the Intelligence Committee was that it was possible to hack into big databases, and the Chinese did a frequent job of it. But it was also possible, once you had hacked in, to leave yourself a backdoor so you could get back into the data anytime you wanted. What do you think? Is that a real danger with the Social Security data? And should we be taking steps in Congress to try to make sure that there's a sort of forensic audit of the doggy intrusion into Social Security so that there isn't a backdoor into people's data being left open for Elon Musk or whomever?
Yeah, we've never had an instance that we're aware of. I mean, The secret back door, always a possibility. Knock on wood. You never want to say we've never been hacked. But we had some really professional people there. Joe Stanaco was a direct report to Keith Alexander at NSA. He had two deputies, Tim May, Tim Anderson. All three of them walked out of the building 2 Fridays ago with their cardboard boxes, and they took the early out. So the entire leadership of the cybersecurity office left on a Friday, no knowledge transfer. We are very vulnerable in the absence of those professionals that were running things. And who would want to work there now? I mean, think about it. Who would want to work there that has the wherewithal to protect those cyber networks? I mean, there's other professionals left behind, but there is no leadership there right now over the cybersecurity of the Social Security Administration of the United States.
Another question. This is Judy from Middletown. How can we get accurate information on Social Security fraud to combat Trump's exaggeration of the percentage of Social Security fraud? You mentioned briefly earlier the supposed, millions of zombies still alive and 150 years old that Trump was referring to in this address to Congress.
Right.
What is going on there? What are the real numbers? And we'll try to post something in the chat, Judy, to help give you something to look at in writing.
Yeah, there's a lot to refute this. The fact is, there are 3 primary ways that we learn of a death. 2 of them are automated. 1 of them is human beings. I am amazed at people that are grieving the loss of a spouse or a mom or a dad that hang on hold for a half hour, an hour. Well, actually, we automated that now to alert us that somebody in their family has died. And then, but the way that we have it automated is that we have contracts with all 50 states and the territories. So as soon as they get a death certificate, a record of a death, we get that automatically. Also, they put in place 10 years ago, if somebody stops billing for Medicare over a certain age, that puts a flag and a stop payment on our side. This has been audited year after year after year by the Inspector General. By the way, they fired all the Inspector Generals, including the ones at Social Security who used to cooperate with us on fighting back against the fraudsters. And they found, out of this entire 72 million people, they found, I think the last time, roughly 889 instances of us continuing to send checks to people who died. Most of them involved, I do believe, beneficiaries who were living abroad. And it was more of a time lag than that there were any zombies. There are no zombies. There is nobody 150 years old receiving Social Security benefits, nor is there anyone 300 years old. They would have had to have come here for the establishment of Jamestown. It's just not a thing. It is not happening. Every reputable group has said this is not true. There used to be posted, they might have taken these down, the OIG reports year after year, but it is not true. It is false. And when Elon Musk and his boys had looked at our database, probably when they shouldn't, and when they didn't know what they were looking at, there was a default setting to a year 1875. They went nuts, called Elon. I guess they must get paid based on, the numbers they put up or the stories they tell. And so Elon Musk went out and said, well, we have people that are over 150 years old. They would have been 60 when Franklin Roosevelt signed the bill. So it is not happening. It is not a thing. The biggest fraud we combated were people that were stealing the identities of folks online and trying to hijack their direct account and switch it to a green dot or some sketchy bank. That was the biggest fraud we combated. It was not the death stuff. And you might find Inspector General reports online if they haven't gotten around to taking them down. But a lot of the performance measures that we used to have up every month, a lot of those have been taken down at Social Security because they don't want you to know things are moving in the wrong direction again after moving in a positive direction for the last year.
So what do you think the motive is for saying things that are not only false, but like cartoon, preposterous, ridiculous things? Why would Trump say that? And he didn't just spend a moment on it in passing in his joint address. He went back to different tranches of impossible ages and kept using these massive numbers, that there was some significance to him saying that over and over again. What do you think it was?
I don't know. I haven't seen the polling. Could there be that many people that are that gullible in this cult-like appeal to some that he just is doubling down on the big lie? If Elon says people are 150 years old, I'm going to say they're 300 years old. But I believe all of the actions they're taking are intended to undermine public trust in Social Security. They are breaking its ability to serve the customers, so then they can say, aha, see, it finally broke. They can't even serve you. So we've got to liquidate it, and trust us. This is all for the good, and we're going to find other ways to make this work. I really think that they want the 2.7 trillion that is still built up in that trust fund reserve, intentionally, by the way, to cover baby boomers. You know, Social Security is a pay-as-you-go program. The people that are working today pay in, and those dollars go out that same year to pay people that are on benefits, retired or disabled. And then we draw down the difference from that trust fund. So I think they want the money in the trust fund, Senator. I think they don't want it invested in treasury bonds. I think, who knows, maybe they wanted invested in Bitcoin, if you want to talk about a Ponzi scheme. But
maybe they simply want to transfer it in the form of credit that will allow them to lower taxes for billionaires and big corporations by $2 trillion, which is their stated goal.
Look, Senator, I do not know what their twisted intent is, but I can tell you this from having run the agency and help those individuals turn that leaking battleship on a dime. Everything that the Trump-Musk co-presidency is doing at Social Security will have the effect of breaking it, making it incapable of serving the customers, and ultimately will cascade into an interruption of benefits. For how long, I do not know. Is it 1 month? Is it 2 weeks and they get it turned back on? Or is perhaps that what they want to do, so that then they can take more drastic actions and claim it's an emergency because so many people depend on that monthly payment to stay alive?
Well, thank you, Governor, for giving us these warnings. It really is significant. Rhode Island depends on Social Security as much as any other state. And it's also part of the compact among Americans that creates a strong middle class. Medicare, Social Security, they're part of the basic fabric of our country. And when we have an administration that's trying to tear into it this way, it's important for people to know no one is on this better than you. I know you got to get back on the road. I'm grateful to you for pulling over for us. Thank you very, very much.
Hey, thank you for fighting for Social Security, Senator. There's nobody better in the Senate for standing up for it. So thank you for fighting. Thanks a lot.
Yes, sir.
We'll see you, everybody.
So the one question that I will answer from Social Security questions that I can answer because it's my bill was, why can't we shore up the Social Security fund by raising the income threshold? So as you know, people pay Social Security on income up to about $160,000. Above that, even if you're making $160 million, you don't pay a penny more in Social Security. So if you want to figure out how to avoid the collision of the baby boomers coming on board with the existing cash funding, you put more money into the system. And the simplest way to do it is to have you make the same contribution with your $160 millionth of income that you make with your $160,000th of income. And so my bill would do exactly that, and close a few unfortunate loopholes as well. And when we had a hearing on it in the Budget Committee, the actuaries for Medicare and for Social Security said that my legislation would extend the viability of both Social Security and Medicare literally as far as the eye can see. Actuaries look 75 years out. That's as far as they are willing to look professionally. And as far as their eyes could see, 75 years, it would make it sound. So, question from Carol. Why is this administration putting up with so many unqualified people? Is it because they're easy to manipulate? Carol, I would say that you nailed it. I'm in the process of reading a book by a guy named Bill Shirer, who was a reporter who was in Europe. He was a reporter for American news outlets, and he was in Europe 1930 to 1940. His book is called The Nightmare Years, and it's about the rise of Hitler. And one of the things people noticed about the people around Hitler was what a bunch of freaks and also-rans and losers they were. And what Hitler liked about freaks and also-rans and losers was that they knew they could never get the big job, they could never get the fancy uniform, they could never get the elaborate title, they could never get the power legitimately on their own. They simply weren't capable of doing that. Their entire hook for all of those goodies was their loyalty and their fealty to Adolf Hitler. And it is always a sign of autocracy coming on when unqualified people are given very important positions, because the boss, Trump in this case, knows that, for instance, Kash Patel would never qualify in any real world to run the FBI. Kash Patel knows that the only reason he is at the FBI is because he has sucked up to Donald Trump, and that his unquestioning loyalty to Donald Trump under all circumstances is the term and condition of his continued service. And he's willing to do it because he gets the big office and the power and the agents driving him around and all of that. So you are dead right, Carol, to note that unqualified people being put into office, whether it's a Hegseth or a Tulsi Gabbard or a Kash Patel, are a strong sign that somebody is up to no good. John from Scituate, why hasn't Elon Musk been subpoenaed by Congress? Because we don't have a House of Congress with a Democratic majority. We did some subpoenas when I was in the Senate. We had a big fight about them. And the Republicans promised that they wouldn't enforce the subpoenas, because you have to go to the Senate floor to enforce a subpoena. You get the subpoena from the committee, but if the person tells you to go pound sand, then you've got to go to the Senate floor and get a vote from the whole Senate to enforce the subpoena. And the Republicans publicly announced, no way, don't pay any attention to these Democrat subpoenas. We're not going to require enforcement. Over on the House side, it's different. So if we win back the House in 2026, then Elon Musk can be subpoenaed. And it'll be interesting to see if he sticks around to be subpoenaed and debriefed, or if he takes off to China or South Africa or someplace to get the heck out of Dodge. Carol from Portsmouth, how do I feel about a government shutdown? Well, I'm still holding out hope that in the next couple of days, we can salvage what we want, which is a short continuing resolution, like 4 or 5 weeks, to allow the appropriators to agree on the outlines of an appropriations bill that we can then proceed. So we go back to bipartisan regular order and away from the current madness. I will say that in a government shutdown, some very, very dangerous things can happen. In a government shutdown, the Office of Management and Budget, which is run by a complete crank and ideologue named Russell Vought, can do things like decide who in an agency is essential and who's non-essential, and dismiss the non-essential people. He can decide what programs are essential and non-essential, and close out the non-essential programs. They can set up contingency plans that allow them to decide what to operate, what not to operate, and then go to the contingency plan as an effect of being in shutdown mode. And they can then, once they're in shutdown, they can decide what agencies to bring back out of shutdown. Shutdown doesn't have to end all at once. They can say, okay, we're bringing the Defense Department back. We're bringing Homeland Security back. We're bringing Veterans Affairs back. But does Department of Education ever come back? Does EPA ever come back? They have the power to do so much in a shutdown mode to disable and destroy government, as Governor O'Malley was describing what's going on at Social Security. They can do that wholesale, and we really don't have much to say about it when we're in government shutdown. And we can't make the argument that they're violating the Article 1 congressional power of the purse because we've walked away from that. So there are real dangers. On the other hand, the so-called continuing resolution, the bill that we've been offered, really isn't much better than that. So there are two very bad outcomes, and we're hoping we can try to find a way to get to the good outcome, which is away from the madness and back to regular order. James from Bristol, how specifically does Musk's role in the Trump administration benefit his and Trump's financial bottom line? Well, that's a little bit hard to keep track of because I think it does it in innumerable ways. Essentially, Elon Musk's entire life has been funded by the American taxpayer through contracts and grants and so forth that he's received to set up his companies. I'll give an example for Musk, and I'll give an example for Trump, but it's not the only thing. There's lots more. For Musk, the example I'd give is that there was a big contract, many millions of dollars, that Verizon was in line to get to provide various services for the FAA. And out of no place, the decision was sent to the FAA, not Verizon, got to be Starlink. Give the contract to Starlink. Starlink is Elon Musk's company. So that's the Elon Musk example. The Trump example is that Trump has set up his own crypto coin, and it's not necessarily doing very well. And by the way, it's a super easy way to bribe him because of the secrecy of crypto money pouring in. Nobody sees it, but he can be told who is pouring money in. But what he did was he decided that he would establish a reserve. We've got a strategic oil reserve, so that if we had to go to war suddenly, or if oil got cut off, like back in the 70s, we had an oil reserve to keep the American economy going with heating oil and fuel oil and all of that. He set up a strategic crypto reserve, which does nothing except pump up the value of cryptocurrencies because people know that there's now a big new buyer in town who has to buy cryptocurrencies to fill up the so-called crypto reserve. If it weren't so flagrantly corrupt, it would actually be almost funny. It's like a scene from a bad movie. And from Providence, do letters to the president and or cabinet members and elected officials make a difference? Somewhat. When people ask me, what can I do? Sheldon, what can I do? What I say is go to your contacts. Or if you still have a Rolodex, go to your Rolodex and flip through it and find everybody you know who lives in a state that has a Republican senator. Pennsylvania, Florida, Alaska, Maine, and ask them to reach out to their senator's office. Because I will tell you that for me, a letter from a Rhode Islander stands apart from mail that just comes in through the general mail chute. And so hearing from constituents truly does matter. And so I think it really is important. I'd recommend that advice. Go through your contacts list in your phone, go through your Rolodex on your desk, find people you know who are in states with Republican senators, and ask them, please get in touch. Please email them. Please send them a letter. Please put in a phone call to their offices. It made a big difference to my Republican colleagues when Elon Musk started messing around in people's data and people got nervous. So many calls came into the United States Senate, 1,600 per minute, that it shut down the Senate phone system for a while. And that pulse of anger about what Elon Musk was doing really reverberated through the Republican caucus. It's worth remembering that if 3 Republicans stand up in the House, Musk and Trump can be stopped. If 4 Republicans stand up in the Senate, Musk and Trump can be stopped. They're not standing up. They're being rolled, but hearing from their constituents does matter. So, John from Warwick, why is it important to Rhode Islanders that we and our EU allies help Ukraine achieve a peace with security guarantees? Well, let me start by confessing that I am a huge supporter of Ukraine. I think it's absolutely essential that we defend Ukraine. I can't help but think back to the war my father fought in at World War II. And if we had stopped Hitler when he went into Poland, history would have been different. I think Putin is evil. I think he has very dangerous purposes. He wants to restore the Soviet Empire and more. And he sees a lot of countries around him that he wants. Ukraine was first on his list. If he can get away with it in Ukraine, he will keep pressing, keep pushing, and keep causing disturbance in Europe. Now, why does it matter to Rhode Islanders? It matters to Rhode Islanders because well, first of all, we're decent people. We remember that the greatest generation went to battle to protect Europe back then. If our president, Franklin Roosevelt, had, instead of backing Churchill and doing Lend-Lease, said to Churchill, you really got to make a deal with Hitler, and we're cutting off Lend-Lease and all of our supplies to you until you make a deal. And by the way, you shouldn't expect to keep your whole island. I don't think history would think very well of America or Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So as Americans, we have that stake, but as Rhode Islanders, we also live in a very global economy, and big companies like CVS, like Hasbro, operate in that global economy. And a peaceful international system is very important for the success of the international economy. You saw what happened to prices just when Putin went into Ukraine, and our gas prices shot up as all the big fossil fuel companies gouged. That hit people in the pocketbook right away. If this keeps going, if he keeps going into other countries, that is going to be, I think, a real economic danger. Back to Social Security with Mary from Lincoln. If there is a benefit interruption, do you think there will be any response from Republicans? So this is a good connection to an earlier question from, I don't have it in front of me, so I don't have the name, but what is it that will make Republicans stop rolling over for Trump? So this is a version of that. I do think that a benefit interruption will cause second thoughts. I know, because I have friends on the Republican side, that there are a lot of people on the Republican side who are very anxious about different things. Some are very anxious about the cuts to the Veterans Administration. Some are very anxious about the dangers to Social Security. Some are very anxious about the dangers to Medicaid, because some of the reddest states have the most needy people on Medicaid. For some, it was turning on Zelensky and turning on Ukraine and taking the side of the tyrant against the democracy. So I would say that there is pressure building within the Republican caucus to find something where they can draw a line and begin to reassert themselves. They can't do it individually, because he can destroy anybody who pops their head up individually. But a little bit like they did with Matt Gaetz, that creepy character who was the supposed nominee for Attorney General, so many people went to their leader, John Thune, and said, John, this can't be. And so many signals went to the White House saying, no, this can't be. You can't do this. That Gaetz ended up withdrawing his nomination. After that, it was one person here, one person there, one person there. And the Trump crowd and the Musk flying monkeys all attacked them. And so they backed down. But that doesn't change the fact that there is resentment and fear building. And when the resentment exceeds the fear, I think we'll see something by way of a stand, but very much too little and too late. Deb, I'm a veteran and very concerned about what's being done to the VA, what can be done to stop them. We are doing everything we can to put a spotlight on them, to go to the Senate floor and talk about this, to show Republicans what is happening, and so that they know that they own it if Trump continues with his efforts to degrade the Veterans Administration. We're watching very carefully on the Rhode Island stuff. If you don't know it, the Veterans Benefits Office in Rhode Island is the premier Veterans Benefits Office in the country. It's the place where programs that aren't working well get sent to get them straightened out. It's the place where new programs get deployed because they know that they'll get the bugs out well. And our VA hospital is one of the best in the country. So as these cuts come through of potentially tens of thousands of people, we want to put a spotlight on that and show what the cost is so that veterans organizations, who Republicans listen to a lot, begin to stand up more and more. Big kudos to the Veterans of Foreign Wars, which put out a very strong statement about the warned of VA cuts. So that kind of pressure really, really helps. So Deb, contact your veterans service organizations and ask them to make sure that their voices are being heard. Pat from Cumberland, Rhode Island, can you explain what is going on with the tariffs? Cool boy. Kind of, and also not kind of. I think there are two things going on. One is that there clearly are ways in which American companies have been cheated with foreign competition. The most obvious is China. When I sat on the Intelligence Committee, we were looking at the extent to which China was hacking into American companies and stealing our intellectual property, or requiring the surrender of intellectual property in order to open a factory in China, or having workers that work in the factory in China suddenly depart and set up their own competing factory across the street. I described it as the biggest theft in human history, the intellectual property theft from the US into China. And you heard earlier the mention of Keith Alexander. He started using that phrase of mine. So the Chinese have really come after us hard, and we need to rebalance that. And there are lots of ways to do that. So there is real logic to some tariffs. But when you start throwing around these threats of tariffs, when you say, well, it's going to be 25% for Canada, no, 50% for Canada, no, 25% for Canada, no, 25% for Mexico, no, nothing for Mexico, now I'm back to 25% for Mexico. What that does, entirely separate from the tariffs, is it creates an environment in which businesses that are exporting and importing across the Mexican border, whether they're sending supplies to an American factory or whether they're Americans buying parts for something that they assemble in the US, whatever the business relationship is, it gets complicated by the risk of not knowing what's going on. Business needs certainty to plan. And so the rashness and the recklessness of all of this thrashing around with tariffs is really damaging. That is part of why the stock market has been sliding. That is part of why GDP, gross domestic product of the United States, is projected to decline. And, I think Trump's playing with fire when he messes with the tariffs that way. There is a sensible way to apply tariffs in a thoughtful and a legal way. And then there is what he is doing. And it is making a big economic mess. But I think he enjoys it because it makes him the center of attention, and it makes people have to bow down to him and, make nice to get the tariffs lifted. And it assuages his self-importance. So, Barbara, what can we do for you? That's a pretty sweet question. Thank you. I'm going to be fine. I think that what we can do is to really, I think, help each other. I think it's important to, if you're feeling a little bit desperate about what's going on, make sure you find other people to talk to. Make sure you join groups. Barbara Mikulski used to say, don't agonize, organize. So join a group that you have an affinity for. Start a group if you don't want to join one. Build a community or join a community so that you feel less alone and anxious. And I guess two things you can do for me. One is when some of these Trump cuts come through and they hit an individual person, the story of what that meant for that person and that family can be devastatingly powerful. So make sure my office gets the personal stories. When Elon Musk says waste, fraud, and abuse, that's just a line of hooey. What's real is what these savage cuts are doing in real lives. And you arm me when you give me those human stories. And then if you are on the receiving end of a federal grant and it is not coming through, we need to know that. Because what has happened is that Judge McConnell at our U.S. District Court said the freeze is illegal, the money's got to flow. But the Trump administration is not obeying that court order. They won't say no, because then a contempt attaches to them. So instead, they've done what I call retreat into the fog bank, where you can't get your call returned. You can't get your email answered. If you do, the person who doesn't know what they're talking about and can't give you an answer, or they can only give you a general or a vague answer, or they tell you, don't worry, it's going to be all right. We just are still working it out. Or even sometimes they say, don't worry, all set, the money's coming. And across all of that fog, the fact remains that the money doesn't actually come. You can't believe what you're told by the Trump administration. So knowing when money that is due and owing on a grant or a contract or some obligation from the federal government, when that's jammed up, is helpful to us. So I guess those would be the two things that you could do for me. One, be nice to look out for and take care of each other and other Rhode Islanders around you. And two, get us the personal stories and the still frozen funds stories. From John, I really appreciate your Senate procedure tweets. Do you plan to do that again? Maybe videos? Yeah, I think I do. In fact, my comms director, the wonderful, brilliant Megan McCabe, is right here handing me these cards. And we were talking about doing a little bit of an explainer about what happens if the government gets put into shutdown. In regular times, everybody wants to get back out. And there may be a certain amount of political jockeying and noise making and nonsense, but the trajectory will be, let's get the hell out of the shutdown. It is not clear that Trump and his OMB director, Russell Vought, want to get out of a shutdown. There is a strong case to be made that they want a shutdown, because in a shutdown, they can bring a whole bunch of tools to bear to close and change government agencies and services, to get rid of personnel, both individually by saying you're non-essential, or through what they call riffing, reduction in force, where they can get rid of a whole group of people who serve a particular section of an agency by saying, okay, we can't afford that agency any longer. We're not going to do that. You all have to go. And so those dangers are very, very, very real. And for this crowd, staying in shutdown and making us beg to get back out of shutdown, making us beg to reopen the Department of Education or the Environmental Protection Agency or the National Museums or the Park Service. It's a really difficult situation when you have a party to the dispute who actually wants the shutdown. And that's what I believe Trump and his little MAGA minions do. They won't say it because they don't want to own it, but they want the shutdown. So last question. Can you repeat the sticky notes of encouragement that you shared on your last assembly? Yeah, I keep a bunch of these on my desk. I really adored Representative Anna Eshoo. She just retired. Here's one of my favorites from her. It says, I'm really nice until I have a reason not to be. I thought that was pretty good. Then at John McCain's funeral, I was a pallbearer in John's funeral. I was the one Senate pallbearer. And I wrote down this at the funeral. He fought obstinately and exuberantly. That's what one of the speakers said about him. And I thought obstinately and exuberantly characterized John pretty well. Then I've got Galatians here. Let us not be weary in well-doing, for in due season we shall reap, if we faint not, if we faint not. So let us not faint. Edmund Burke, the legendary British Parliament member, wrote, never despair, but if you do, work on in despair. And then the last one was from Albert Camus, the French writer, who said, in the midst of winter, I found there was within me an invincible summer. So back to what we can do for each other, I think if we each try to find within ourselves our invincible summer, that will give us more strength to persist and be relentless through, to go to Shakespeare, this present winter of our discontents. Thank you all so much for joining me. I'm really grateful. We will keep doing these as new topics come up. I'm particularly thankful to Governor O'Malley. He's in a lot of demand right now because he knows Social Security so well, and he is sounding really important alarms about what they're doing. This may be more than just incompetence and rashness and being a punk kid who thinks he's a genius because he's from Silicon Valley. It may actually have a darker side to it, and we need to keep a really sharp eye out for that. So again, thanks for joining me tonight. Stay in touch. We will get through this together, and brighter days are ahead.